Hello everyone, thanks for joining us here on Horizon. I'm Rob McClendon. Well, with the Oklahoma legislature back in session, lawmakers are facing some increasingly difficult decisions. The state's appropriated budget sitting close to $1 billion below earlier projections, and there is no shortage of suggestions on how to fix it, which took us to the Oklahoma Policy Institute's Budget Summit. With more, here's our Blaine Singletary.
Can't get there.
A packed crowd gathered for OPI's Budget Policy Summit, and one of the big questions at the summit was, of course, how did we get here?
You know, it's a combination of a number of things. Obviously, the plummeting oil and gas prices are playing a role. When oil is $30 a barrel, Oklahoma, being an energy-dependent economy, is always going to be suffering difficulties.
That's David Blatz, Executive Director of the Oklahoma Policy Institute, and he says while oil is part of today's shortfall, there were still problems at the state capitol even when oil cost 3 times as much.
We were still not able to give our teachers a raise. We were still dealing with overcrowded correctional facilities and untreated mental illness. We have seen that in good times and in bad, Oklahoma is falling short of being able to pay for its bills.
So in order to get a look at what's causing this long-standing problem, Blatz says don't just focus on the here and now.
We have passed over $1 billion in income tax cuts over the last decade. That has affected our budget situation. We have allowed tax breaks to grow and expand, hundreds of millions of dollars in subsidies and credits every year.
These persistent tax cuts and the legislators behind them were the focus of a lot of the criticism at the summit, most of which came from House Minority Leader Scott Inman.
It has been a group of legislators who are really governing by a political philosophy, not by a political reality. They believe that if you just keep cutting income taxes, that somehow it'll all grow back to us and everything will be great. But what you see is $1 billion worth of income tax cut the last 10 years, and now we're looking at $1 billion budget hole.
Inman and other speakers at the summit point out that these income taxes haven't really helped the state economy, and the lion's share of the savings are going to the top 20% of earners in the state.
And most of that income tax has very little, if any, effect for people in my community and most around the state. They get $30 back a year, and that's where we are. And we've got to get our politicians to stop being politicians and start governing by reality.
While income taxes have plummeted, some lawmakers have tried to raise sales taxes in its place, but Inman says that's just another part of the problem.
They're saying, oh, let's go raise taxes on folks who smoke, who happen to be a lot of poorer folks. Let's raise sales taxes on folks. What it means is the folks that could actually afford to pay the taxes, they got the cuts, and the middle class and lower middle class and just working folks in Oklahoma, they're going to pay more when they buy a pack of cigarettes, or they're going to pay more when they go buy milk for their kids.
And this over-reliance on sales taxes to fund the government is being felt in other places too, as Elizabeth Gray, city manager of Sand Springs, told us.
Oklahoma cities are the only state in the union that rely solely on sales tax for the revenue stream. If we're going to look at modernizing sales tax, we need to also look at modernizing other tax sources as well.
By state policy, sales tax is the only source for cities for funding such things as police and fire departments, as well as roads. And lack of access to ad valorem and other revenue streams frustrates city managers like Gray.
I would say that if you're going to look at changing sales tax, change ad valorem as well, so that cities have a diversified income stream. Also, we get no tax dollars from internet sales, so it actually hurts our local businesses. It hurts our local cities because that income stream is now gone from Oklahoma cities.
Many attendees pointed to the individual aspects that should be improved, but others say lawmakers have to look at the bigger picture. Gary Jones is the state auditor.
Part of the reason where we're at is the lack of long-range planning. You know, instead of having multi-year budgets where you're looking at what possible revenues are going to be in future years and how you're going to be able to have the money necessary to do that, we're dealing with a crisis 1 year at a time.
Deeper tax cuts mean agencies like his won't get as much money from dedicated revolving funds. Normally the legislature can't touch these, but the situation has still affected them.
Sagging oil prices have kind of got us in the hole, but the other things have dug that hole deeper. And so unless you have the amount of revenues you need to cover the expenses that you spend, then you're going to have to spend money out of reserves or revolving funds. And we're starting to deplete those funds. In some cases, they're for dedicated purposes. So we need a better job of managing the state.
Which brings us to the other big question. How do we get out of this? how should lawmakers better manage the government? David Blatz's message to them is don't wait for the oil prices to pick back up to take action.
What we need to do is be able to pursue some long-term sensible things that mean that when we recover, that we're not continuing to face deficits and shortfalls and additional cuts. So we need to put some recurring revenues on the table.
Those revenues would come in the form of trimming tax breaks and corporate loopholes by adopting combined corporate reporting. It's a reform idea that's been on the table for some time, which would limit corporations' abilities to hide money in so-called tax shelters by having them report earnings for each and every part of their company. While the way out is still uncertain, Scott Inman says the most important thing citizens have to do is hold their leaders accountable for it.
They need to understand a couple of things. That one, we didn't get into this mess overnight. It's not just oil and gas prices that put us here. And so what we've got to do as just citizens, we've got to hold our elected officials accountable. We've got to let them know that we understand that their votes, their decisions over the last decade put us into this mess, and it's going to take wise, strong, and effective leadership to make the tough decisions that it will take to get us out of this mess going forward.
And those decisions will indeed be tough, but they will have to be made. Again, David Blatz.
None of this is going to be easy or painless, but we need to be looking at a situation this year that we're able to minimize the severity of cuts. There are going to be cuts. I'm not going to look you in the eye and tell you that there's under any scenario where we're not going to be cutting schools more and healthcare more and colleges and others. There will be some cuts. We need to minimize the severity of that.
When we return, a cautionary tale from north of the border.